Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
It really is the areas that I think identify us uniquely are the fact that it's ubiquitous, right? It works on every single device. You don't need an app. You don't download anything. There's no consumer training. It's agnostic. So as I mentioned, we work on every messaging platform out there and all the emerging messaging platforms. We also work with all the payment processors. So we can reach about 98% of U.S. merchants today.
That was Chris Brunner, the CEO of Authvia, and this is episode 40 of the Leaders in Payments podcast, and Chris is our special guest this week. I'm your host, Greg Myers, and hey, before we get started, if you happen to office in Houston, Austin, or North Texas, check out Fuse Workspace, where their mission is to help others do more. Check them out at fuseworkspace.com. Okay, back to the show. Chris grew up in Southern California, went to the University of Arizona, and today lives in Los Angeles. He has a professional passion for creating a great customer experience and typically enjoys golf, sailing, and traveling, but being the father of 2 teenage daughters, he spends his time today with his family and running the business. Authvia is the leading text-to-pay platform on the market today. It is contactless, secure, and simple, and runs over all major messaging channels. There are no links, no passwords, and no apps. The platform simply runs a transaction, a payment, or a donation over the existing messaging channels. The company started working with recurring biller merchants back 4 years ago, but is now in 20 plus verticals. Beyond just payments, the platform can help manage scheduling, calendaring, and more. Authvia is connected into 24 payment processors and gateways, and 4 of the top 6 largest payment processors either refer or resell the platform. We've got a great episode this week, so let's get started. Hi, Chris. Thank you for being here and welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Southern California, primarily in San Diego. So I've been there most of my life. I went to school at the University of Arizona and then came back to San Diego and really dove into kind of my first corporate gig there, which was with Qualcomm. I can go into that a little bit later. But then today we live up in Los Angeles in the South Bay.
Okay, great. Well, let's talk about the company, Authvia. Tell our audience what Authvia does.
So Authvia is the leading text-to-pay platform in the market today. It's ubiquitous, it's agnostic, and it's a platform that is truly contactless, it's secure, simple, and it runs over all of the popular messaging channels today, such as SMS, RCS, your traditional text channels, in-app messaging, and other digital communication channels, if you will. So, and I think what's most significant about it, where it's different from other, the term text-to-pay is kind of an older term, but it has no links, no passwords, no apps. And it really just drives a seamless transaction, all while having a conversation over the messaging channels.
Okay. Are there specific verticals that you compete in?
Yeah, there are. I think when we started this about 5 years ago, we really dove into the recurring billing scenario, and it was mostly within gas, power, water, utilities, things of that nature, where as a consumer, you'd expect to get a notification every single month, and then you'd simply go ahead and get that text on your phone. You'd reply with your last 4 of your mobile number to make that payment. It would run over your traditional payment rails, and all of that would be done in a matter of seconds, and then the consumer wouldn't hear from us again. So we did that to collect the data to really prove that merchants were going to kind of want this, love this, pay for it. Consumers were going to use it, adopt it, and it was going to have a meaningful impact on the businesses from an ROI perspective, whether it's through accounts receivables or other types of automation. And so once we managed to collect all that data, we began to kind of then pivot and move out to other verticals. And today we're probably in 20 plus different verticals, and really almost any vertical that you can think of, whether it's healthcare, pharmaceuticals, auto service centers, you name it. It really is a great application and platform for helping to drive not only better communications, but quicker, faster, and more seamless transactions.
Okay. Maybe pick one of those popular verticals and give the audience an idea of sort of a real life example of how this would be implemented and used.
Absolutely. So one of the ones that come to mind would be, think of a Jiffy Lube, a grease monkey, something like that. So you today traditionally would drop your vehicle off. You may stay there and, sit in the lobby and have a really bad cup of coffee. You might walk down the street and get a coffee. You might go shopping. You might do a number of different things. In the model where Authvia is implemented as part of their service solution, you'll drop your vehicle off. They'll grab your mobile number. You'll leave. You'll go do your shopping, whatever it might be. You'll receive a text notification saying that your vehicle is ready. It'll have a rich invoice telling you exactly why you're paying $120 to have your oil changed. If they need to have an upgrade because of the windshield wipers or things of that nature, they can text you back and forth. Ultimately, you'll get that invoice. You'll see the amount that's owed. You'll reply with the last four of your mobile number to make that payment on the card that's already been put on file at that merchant. That payment will go through. You'll get a text back that says, hey, your vehicle's ready. The car's under the seat. Thanks so much for coming to Jiffy Lube. And I think what was the biggest motivator in the case of these auto service centers and things of that nature was the fact that having Johnny not come out of the pit 3 times during the course of an hour to talk to somebody who's coming in to make a payment or to come in, to run a credit card and talk to them for 10 minutes about their dog and their kid and everything else. The efficiencies that were going to be gained from this were substantial. In fact, I think they had a 34x ROI and really embraced it pretty aggressively in terms of their plan to roll this out.
Okay. And so when you talk to merchants about this, do you get any real pushback? Like what is their, why do they not want to do it?
I would say that our single biggest hurdle is, I think it's just the status quo, right? I think you find that merchants are used to having the back office be a bit of a mess, right? Whether it's having to collect payments and all sorts of, whether it's still taking checks, taking payments over the phone, people dropping money off, payments coming in electronically, and the understanding of how automation can impact our business, how streamlining that collections process, how removing paper, removing phone calls, removing frustration from a consumer. As you start to talk about it, they start to slowly kind of get it. Once we run a demo for them, it's almost instantaneous. But the lead up to that is just the general, hey, we're good with what we've got. Are you really solving a problem for us? And then once we move past it, show them what we're doing, talk to them about some of the ROI. In almost every case, we end up winning the deal.
So do you have any thoughts on sort of usage? Like, do they see where certain parts or types of customers might respond better than others? It's maybe not a demographic question, but just maybe a customer-based question?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do see it broadly accepted across all demographics. In fact, we've seen no indication that, one group does or does not use it better than the others. What we do see is around different verticals, right? So there are certain verticals where you will see adoption rates above 90%, and that might be the gas, power, water utilities I talked about. You'll see others that you will see a little bit of on the lower end of that, and that might be areas where it's a debt collection, or it might even be healthcare, where what I owe and why I owe it might not be as clear. Do I want to pay this bill? So those are, I think, the areas that we see a pretty broad swath of kind of where this will roll out and where we see adoption based on less about the product and the platform itself, more around the specific use case and why a consumer feels the need to pay or not pay a certain bill, invoice, or even make a donation.
Okay. And the next question is really sort of around how you go to market. So do you have a field sales team? Do you work through partners or sort of all of the above?
Yeah, so we are very much a channel-driven platform, right? So the last 4 years, we have spent time developing some pretty deep channel partnerships, and it's been really primarily within 2 different sectors, if you will. So one was within the payment category. So today we're connected into over 24 payment processors and gateways. 4 of the top 6 payment processors either refer or resell us in some nature today. So we've gotten very deep into the payment side of this business and understanding the value proposition that we provide for them, for their merchants, and for their channels. And on the flip side of that, we've gone the route of the wireless messaging companies out there. And so most people know of Twilio. Twilio is a big player in the US, but internationally they're very small. There's about 10 of those that we connect into today, and pretty much reach every consumer globally over those 10 messaging partners that we partner with today. And in many cases, they, again, resell or refer us into their channel. And the ultimate channels that both of those take us into really is the ISV channel, where we find that one integration might lead to 2,000 Ford Chevy dealers, or might lead to 5,000 pharmacies, or 6,000 pest control companies. So the model is developing those channels over time, providing the resources, the education, the ROI for each of them, and then having them bring us into their respective ISV. And in some case, large enterprise accounts. So we do work with what I'd say is a Fortune 2000 in a case where they're looking to build something custom to their existing system and solution as it is.
Okay. And how big is the company?
So we're relatively small. We're still a startup, if you will, startup in a high growth phase. We've doubled our staff in the last 6 months alone. We are having some tremendous growth as we move through kind of several very large launches. So we've kind of pivoted but we moved from our second platform, which onto our third platform, which is all API driven. That launched back in May, obviously just after COVID. So that was kind of a messy Q2, but all the partners that were planned to launch in June, July, and August are now launching as we speak. So we've got about 10 different launches between now and the end of March. And all of them are with very large substantive players, either large enterprises direct or within some of those big channels that I talked about where they're ISVs that are taking this to market.
Okay. What would you say differentiates your company from your competitors?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think first and foremost is the idea of how we go to market with our go-to-market. So the channel structure we just talked about, thinking about this as an enterprise play, as a market share play, and not just as a company that's going out trying to win merchant processing, because that's not our business. It really is the areas that I think identify us uniquely are the fact that it's ubiquitous, right? It works on every single device. You don't need an app. You don't download anything. There's no consumer training. It's agnostic. So as I mentioned, we work on every messaging platform out there and all the emerging messaging platforms. We also work with all the payment processors. So we can reach about 98% of US merchants today. So the idea is that we wanted to be able to say at this point in time that there's not a merchant, at least domestically, and this could be a very large international play, but today, domestically, there's not a merchant that we could not work with, have up and running literally in under an hour, right? So that's the idea. And then behind all of that, ultimately, I think the big play is that we have a multi-merchant wallet. And that is the idea that if you come into us through, a Ford dealership, your mobile number comes in, you register a card on file, you can then use that at any other product or service that uses us around the country, whether it's a pest control, whether it's a healthcare provider, whether it's a pharmacy, or whether it's an ice cream shop in Michigan.
Okay, so let's dive into that just a little bit more, if you don't mind. I want to make sure the audience understands exactly what the business model is. Do you actually become the merchant of record in some cases?
No, we do not. So we are PCI level 1. We do have the capacity to do that. In some very rare instances, we will do that. But in 95% of our businesses, we do not ever become the merchant of record. We literally sit between the merchant or the ISV and their payment gateway or payment processor of choice. And we facilitate not only the messaging communications, but also the transactions and the receipts.
Okay. So if someone is wanting to use this, I'm thinking of on the consumer side, and I don't have a card on file, how does that happen?
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting. It's something that just recently dawned on me, and that is that if you think of all of the wallets that have gone to market, at least the ones that I can think of, right? So whether it's a PayPal or anybody else, right? As a consumer, I've had to go out, I've had to set up that wallet and then go and find merchants that would accept that wallet. We actually have kind of flipped that model on its head. So as a consumer, I don't necessarily get to opt into an Authvia wallet. I can work if I happen to shop with or happen to do business with merchants that use Authvia, then I will be asked to join the Authvia wallet, right? So again, by that example, if I go to a Blue Cross and Blue Shield and I leave, or I'm coming in for a visit and they ask me for a copay and I text back and I put a card on file and I text back and do my copay, I now have established an Authvia wallet, but it's come to me from a brand like a brand that I know and trust today, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, that does make sense. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the payments industry as a whole, because I think what you guys are doing is very interesting and sort of on the edge of a new trend. So what do you think is going to happen in the next couple of years in the payments industry? Where's it heading? What are the trends that you see?
It's a fantastic question. I think I just kind of snickered a little bit because I've been in business for about 20 years. I've been in payments for the last 5, so I'm mostly a wireless guy, and I don't think of myself as a payments guy, but I do see that what's happening now in payments, and I think it's because payments is becoming democratized, right? You're having APIs, you're having all these fintechs emerge, that you're starting to get a host of executives and startups coming in from outside this existing ecosystem, and they're bringing a lot of innovation to it. I think this industry's been going through innovation for the last 20 years, but it's accelerated a lot. And so I think over the next few years, that pace is only going to get more hectic. You're going to see a lot more innovation. It's getting easier and easier. It used to be a scary place to jump into payments. Today, a lot of that fear has been removed because of technology. In fact, today, there's things that we can do that even 5 years ago we couldn't do that have made our business that much more nimble, sexy, and sophisticated. So I think innovation is going to continue to lead. I think you're going to continue to see consolidation because I think the large organizations are not able to innovate, and that's their way of kind of keeping up. So I would say 2 to 3 years that. Over 10 years, I think it's going to be more whole wholesale, just because I think at the top end of the payments industry and some of our biggest, most strategic partners, as you move up into the C-suite, you've got, a lot of these companies still think about payments only as a transaction. They talk about it as an experience. They talk about it as a customer journey. They say the right things, but getting their organizations to operate and think and innovate is really challenging when you've got 10, 20, 30, 40,000 employees. So I think it's going to take a little bit longer for the big guys to get there, but I think over the next 3 to 5 years, it's very, very exciting in terms of, I think, what's coming.
Sure. Short term, I think some of the things that I read and see and hear and even feel personally with the COVID situation is so much business being driven online and, the whole contactless and not wanting to be face to face. I would think that's been an advantage for you guys, right?
Unfortunately, right? Yeah, it was, I think, a scary time for all of us as we went through that. But I think there's no doubt that companies such as ours have become much more attractive as larger entities, whether it's call centers, whether it's these ISVs, whether it's the payment processors and the gateways, who are all looking for new and better or more efficient ways to kind of drive payments and drive that conversation. It certainly has raised our profile within the industry and within our partners. So without a doubt, it's been a key to part of our acceleration and growth here over the last year.
Okay. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your journey to your role there as the CEO. You talked a little bit about your background, but maybe give us more your professional background, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I started in wireless in the late 90s with Qualcomm. I dove in and really was kind of at the tip of the spear when it came to the wireless data ecosystem. And so when you think about the way we think of apps today in the mobile space, right, with iPhone and with Android, back in late 1999, early 2000, up through 2005 or so, Qualcomm was launching their own mobile app ecosystem. So we rolled that out across the US, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. And it was a tremendous success. It was called BRU, Binary Runtime Environment for Wireless. And it really got me indoctrinated and excited about what was coming. So we were still 2.5G back then. We were on grayscale phones, but we were running around and we were talking to the NBA and the NFL and FedEx and, and anybody that would listen about what was coming with this new evolution of 3G and these new devices and the new bandwidth and all the possibilities therein. And so for me, I got very excited about the wireless space. And I think from 2000 to 2010, wireless was arguably one of the most exciting places to be in the industry. It was just a ton of fun. It was fast changing and fast moving. In 2003, one of our partners called me up and asked me to come to Los Angeles and launch their mobile and interactive division for Univision Communications, which is the 5th largest media company focused on the 50 million U.S. Hispanics. So I came up here. We actually came up here when my oldest daughter was 1, and we were going to be here for 2 years, and she turns 18 next week. So it was a little bit longer than I think we had anticipated, but we actually have grown to love Los Angeles. But so I ran that for 6.5 years. And then most notably, and what really led to Authvia was in 2010, I was the president of an SMS messaging company, and we rolled out the Walmart pharmacy notification platform coast to coast across 4,600 pharmacies. It was, for me at that time, standing there watching people line up and queue up to get their prescriptions after they'd been notified over text, and they still had to pay. And I couldn't help but wonder, how is it that we know all of this, about Greg Myers, and yet we can't just simply let him make that payment, skip the line, take his prescription, and get going? So when I left that company, we took it public, I left, and I really noodled on kind of the next iteration of where messaging was going and how merchants and businesses were going to engage with their customers, and understood that, SMS and chat, in-app messaging, all these things were going to eventually one day play a big role. And we were at that point with one-way messaging. We're now moving into that two-way messaging where you and I can have a full-on chat, whether it's I check into Marriott and the general manager asks me if how my trip was, do I need anything special for my room? That chat's happening. And then now if he says, hey, by the way, for an extra $50, I can upgrade you to a suite, with a view of the park. And I reply with a PIN 1212, take the upgrade and go to my suite. So, I left that understanding of when we rolled out the Walmart notification platform and started Authvia with the understanding that payments was going to be the next big opportunity within kind of this global messaging play.
Okay. And at Authvia, are you backed by private equity or anything like that?
So for the first 18 months or so, I bootstrapped it. And then I had done quite a bit of work with private equity in my former life. And I opted to go the route of some privately wealthy individuals and some seed money until we got to the stage where we actually had figured every piece of this out. And thankfully, I took that route. So we've raised a substantial amount of money through our network, but we're probably on the cusp of going that route to private equity.
Gotcha. Okay. So maybe name a couple of things, maybe one that's work related and maybe one more personal related that you're passionate about.
Oh, wow. So I think I'm just laughing because I have such a limited scope right now. But so I would say on a business side, it's really about the customer experience. And I think I learned that early on. It's that customer journey. How do you make that better, seamless, keep it simple, stupid, provide a better customer experience. And I think on the personal side, like I've always been incredibly passionate about golf and sailing and traveling, but being the father of 2 teenage daughters, and being married and running a startup business, I really, frankly, don't have a whole lot of time to be passionate outside of my family and the business right now, with the hope that I can get back to a couple of those things that I love in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I think a lot of people answer that question, the same. And then you add COVID on top of that, and a lot of people's passions they're not able to act on these days, unfortunately.
Going to the movies, right? Like, we don't do
Right.
that.
Exactly. So I started in payments about 15 years ago. And when I started in payments, there wasn't a lot of investment in it. It was sort of like you said earlier, it was very transactional. There wasn't a lot about experience. There wasn't all the fintechs. There wasn't all this money being dumped into the industry. And so I sort of just fell into it. But what advice would you give people who now are maybe coming out of college, they're looking at payments or fintech, whichever way you want to look at it, and saying, wow, I think I want to go into that industry. What kind of advice would you give them as they're maybe coming out of college or maybe even job transitioning and looking at the industry? What kind of things would you tell them to do? What kind of advice would you give them?
It's funny. I've had several of these conversations as of late with some kids that I know that are kind of coming out of college and whatnot. And I tell them all the same thing. I mean, I think that, fintech is today what wireless was, in the early 2000s to me. Like, it is exciting. It's vibrant. It's flush with innovation. I would say dive in, go where you're seeing change, go where you're seeing innovation, go on the software side. I think as I've learned in this space, the ISVs, which are these integrated software companies, are really starting to own the space. And I think the payment guys, if they don't keep up with that, are going to end up getting hurt. Ultimately, software is where you want to be. And I think that payments is a fantastic place to be if you're a young person coming out. You can certainly find your space there. I mean, if you think about payments touches every aspect of our life. It's one of those areas that you could be passionate about nonprofits and be in payments. You could be passionate about e-commerce and be in payments, or passionate about travel and be in payments. You can be passionate about almost anything and still have payments play an integral role about where you go with with your career.
Yeah. I wanted to go back and ask a couple of follow-up questions about the business because I don't know that we covered them and you mentioned them. So I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to talk about them. But you said sort of the nonprofit, the donation side of the business. Maybe talk a little bit about sort of how that works and a use case around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about text to give or text to donate, so these terms have been around for a long time. And so if you think back to the wireless days, it used to be that I could give, I'd get a message that says, hey, text to give $10, right? And I'd reply with a code or something. That $10 donation that I would give to the Red Cross would show up on my Verizon wireless bill. It would not run over the traditional credit card, debit card networks. It would show up on my Verizon bill. They would 90 days later pay the Red Cross, and then I'd feel good about myself. But I could only donate $10, and I can only do that on that one campaign. Where things have evolved and where they're different today. So, for example, if Red Cross did a push out to their database of, let's just say, 3 million subscribers and said, hey, the Mississippi is flooded. We need to raise food for shelter and tents and food. Please donate. In our model, in our platform, the Red Cross could send that out. And if you've ever donated to the Red Cross, you could text back, just give, and any dollar amount that you want. So, I might give $10, you might give $200, and so it'd just be give $200. That amount of money would then run off your traditional credit, debit, or ACH. In the event you didn't have a card on file, we hit you with a Bitly. But the beauty of that is that forevermore going forward, on any campaign the Red Cross is running, they can simply send out an outbound blast. You can choose to donate or not donate. But unlike today, 99% of the cases, when I get a link or you get a link to donate, no matter how many times we've donated previously, we still have to go back in, fill out our credit card information, fill out our CVV, and make sure that we confirm this is the payment amount we want. So in many cases, they lose opportunity to get donations, right? Because donations are generally, somebody's tugging at your heart, and you feel it in the moment you want to give, and it's a fleeting moment, right? If the dog jumps in the car or something happens, you move on and you forget about it. So in our model, it makes it incredibly easy for you to just reply back with the word give and any dollar amount that you want, and that transaction is going to run. It's about as seamless as you get.
Okay. And then the other area that I want to touch on is you mentioned sort of it's not just payments, but there's also some, I guess, I don't know if customer service is the right word, but at least communication with customers. Like, how are you seeing it being strictly transactional? It's a payment versus there being some back and forth, like you gave the Jiffy Lube kind of example where they're kind of talking back and forth. How much of that versus payments is it, or do you see it transitioning? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, so I think, we started off with the idea around just focusing on the payment itself. And then as you might imagine, right, you begin to scale out from there as you understand that there are greater needs than just that. And there are many needs that are tethered to that, right? So it might be, a pest control guy who's going to show up at your house. Can you confirm that you'll be there? He'll be there in 30 minutes. Yes, I confirm. Great. The charge is going to be, $55. Can you go ahead and pay for that? You pay for that. He shows up and then he steps outside, he pays for that. So we can do scheduling, we can do calendaring. We're doing stuff in telehealth today, much like what I just said, where you'll get a text notifying you to confirm your appointment. You'll get another text to do your copay, and then you get a text with your link that you can log on and have the telehealth appointment with your doctor. So all sorts of areas where we're trying to combine scheduling, calendaring. It has an intelligent assist to it, in effect, so that it's a smart enough API set or conversational tool that allows for us to understand what you're looking to do as a consumer. We can route you into a customer care call. We can route you into email. We can route you into an IVR. There's lots of things that the system can do to add value to that conversation, if you will.
Okay, great. I appreciate that clarification. Well, Chris, we've covered a lot today about the company and you and the industry. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrap up?
No, not that I can think of, other than I think it's just a fantastic time to be in the payment space and to see the change that's happening in front of all of us. And I thank you for your time and for having me on today.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for being on the show. And I know your time's very valuable, so I really appreciate you being here.
Great. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.